I'm Eliza, 32, and I was standing in my mother's kitchen watching her humiliate my 8-year-old daughter in front of the entire family. "You're already getting a little pudgy, sweetie," she said to Emma, moving the birthday cake away from her. "You don't need any of this." The room went silent. 23 family members, all staring. My daughter's face crumpled. And my mother? She smiled like she'd just given helpful advice. I picked up my purse, took Emma's hand, and walked out without saying a word. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by family cruelty. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Now, let me back up and explain how we got to this point, because trust me, this story gets so much worse before it gets better. My mother, Patricia, had always been what you might call particular about appearances. Growing up, she monitored every bite I took, every pound I gained, every outfit I wore. But I thought, foolishly, that becoming a grandmother might soften those edges. That she'd save her critiques for private moments rather than public humiliation. The party was for my nephew Jake, my brother David's son, turning 5. Emma had been so excited, picking out her favorite dress, a pink number with tiny butterflies that made her feel like a princess. She'd helped me wrap Jake's gift, carefully choosing dinosaur wrapping paper because she remembered he loved T-Rex. We'd arrived early to help set up. Emma immediately ran to play with her cousins, while I arranged balloon clusters and helped my sister-in-law Linda with the decorations. Everything seemed normal, pleasant even. My mother had complimented Emma's dress, asked about school, the usual grandmother small talk. There were no warning signs, no hints of what was coming, which makes what happened next feel like such a calculated ambush. The cake ceremony started typically. Jake blew out his candles while everyone cheered. Mom began cutting pieces, distributing them around the table. She handed slices to Jake, to his older sister Mia, to the various cousins and adults. When she reached Emma, she paused, set the knife down, and delivered that devastating line about being pudgy with the casual cruelty of someone commenting on the weather. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. The shocked silence. Emma's confusion melting into hurt. My brother David staring at his shoes. Linda's mouth hanging open. And my mother, completely unbothered, continuing to serve cake as if she hadn't just destroyed a child's self-esteem for no apparent reason. The drive home was heartbreaking. Emma kept asking if she was really fat, if Grandma was right, if she should stop eating dinner. My beautiful, healthy daughter, suddenly seeing herself through my mother's warped lens. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep clutching her stuffed elephant, I sat in my living room trying to process what had happened. This wasn't just garden variety grandmother criticism. This was deliberate, public, and aimed at an 8-year-old child. But here's the thing about my family. We don't discuss unpleasant truths. We sweep them under carefully maintained rugs and pretend everything's fine. So when my phone rang the next morning at exactly 9:15, I knew it wouldn't be an apology. "Eliza, honey," Mom's voice was butter smooth, like nothing had happened. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." I waited, giving her the chance to address the elephant in the room, to apologize for humiliating my daughter, to acknowledge that she'd crossed a line. Instead, she launched into something completely different, something that would change everything. "I need your help with a financial situation," Mom continued, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when she wanted something. Not quite begging, but definitely calculated to invoke guilt. "See, here's what you need to understand about my family's financial dynamics. And this is where the story gets really interesting. My parents have always lived slightly beyond their means, maintaining appearances while secretly struggling. The big house in the nice neighborhood, the luxury cars, the expensive vacations, all financed through credit and what they assumed would be endless equity growth. The thing is," Mom continued, clearly uncomfortable with having to explain, "your father and I are having some trouble with the mortgage payments. Interest rates, and his business has been slow." I almost laughed. Not because their situation was funny, but because the timing was so incredibly tone-deaf. Less than 24 hours after humiliating Emma, she was calling to ask for money. "How much trouble?" I asked, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. "Well, we're about 3 months behind. The bank is threatening foreclosure proceedings if we don't bring it current soon." 3 months. That meant this hadn't just happened overnight. They'd been struggling for a while, probably hoping Dad's construction business would pick up, or that some magical solution would present itself. How much would it take to get current? $15,000. I set my coffee cup down carefully. $15,000 wasn't impossible for me. I'd built a successful accounting practice over the past decade, and my divorce settlement from Emma's father had left me financially comfortable. But it also wasn't pocket change. "Mom," I said slowly, "did you consider talking to David about this?" The pause was telling. My brother David, the golden child, lived in a starter home with a modest income from his job at the insurance company. He had 2 kids and a wife who worked part-time. Asking him for $15,000 would be asking him to drain his emergency fund or take on serious debt. But asking me? Well, I was single, successful, and in their minds, probably had money just sitting around waiting to solve their problems. David has his own family to worry about, Mom said quickly. And you've always been so good with money, so responsible. Translation: David gets protected from family financial drama, but I get volunteered as the family bank. Now let me be clear about something. If this had been a normal request from normal parents who treated their granddaughter with basic respect, I probably would have found a way to help. Family emergencies happen. Good people sometimes need assistance. But these weren't normal circumstances, and this wasn't a normal request. This was my mother calling to ask for money the day after publicly humiliating my daughter, acting like nothing had happened, like she was entitled to my financial help regardless of how she treated my child. I need to think about it, I told her. Think about it? Her voice sharpened. Eliza, this is time sensitive. The bank isn't going to wait for you to think about it. There it was. The guilt pressure I'd grown up with. The implication that my hesitation was unreasonable, selfish, potentially catastrophic for the family. I understand the timeline, Mom, but $15,000 isn't something I decide in 5 minutes. Well, don't take too long. Your father is beside himself with worry. After I hung up, I sat in my home office looking at my financial statements. The money was there. I could write the check today if I wanted to. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. Emma wandered into my office around noon, still subdued from the previous day's humiliation. Mommy, are we going to Grandma's house for dinner on Sunday like usual? And that's when it hit me. The perfect, beautiful irony of the situation. My mother wanted me to save their house. The house where she'd spent years criticizing my weight, my life choices, my parenting decisions. The house where she'd just humiliated Emma in front of the entire family. The house that represented everything I'd never been good enough for in her eyes. Have you ever experienced that moment when the universe hands you exactly the right opportunity at exactly the right time? Sunday dinner at my parents' house had been a tradition for as long as I could remember. Every week, the whole family would gather around Mom's dining room table, David and Linda with their kids, sometimes my Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim, and Emma and me. It was supposed to be about family connection, but really, it was about Mom's need to control the narrative. To be the matriarch holding court, dispensing opinions about everyone's lives while serving pot roast and passive-aggressive commentary. Emma and I skipped that Sunday. For the first time in probably 5 years, we stayed home and made pancakes instead. My phone rang during breakfast. David, where are you guys? He asked. Mom's wondering if you're running late. We're not coming today. Silence on his end. In our family, you didn't just skip Sunday dinner. You showed up unless you were hospitalized or out of state. Is everything okay? Is Emma sick? Emma's fine, David. We're just taking a break from family dinners for a while. Another pause. This is about yesterday, isn't it? Look, Liz, you know how Mom is. She doesn't always think before she speaks. There it was. The family motto. You know how Mom is. As if her behavior was some unchangeable force of nature that the rest of us just had to endure. David, she humiliated your niece in front of 20 people. She called an 8-year-old fat during a birthday party. I know it was inappropriate, he said quickly, but you storming out just made everything more dramatic. Now everyone's walking on eggshells. I actually laughed at that. Everyone's walking on eggshells? David, your daughter got to eat cake at her brother's party. Mine got publicly shamed. But sure, let's worry about everyone else's comfort. You're being kind of intense about this, Liz. Kind of intense. About protecting my daughter from emotional abuse. Right. Tell Mom we'll see her when she's ready to apologize to Emma. You know she's never going to apologize. Then I guess we won't be seeing her. I hung up and looked across the table at Emma, who was carefully arranging blueberries on her pancakes in the shape of a smiley face. Mommy, are you sad about Grandma? No, baby. I'm proud of us for making good choices. The next 3 days were quiet. No calls from my parents, no guilt trip text messages, no flying monkey sent to bring me back into line. I started to think maybe they'd gotten the message. Then Thursday happened. I was at my office reviewing quarterly reports for a client when my assistant Karen knocked on my door. Your father's here to see you, she said, looking uncertain. He says it's urgent. Dad never came to my office. In 10 years of running my practice, he'd visited exactly 0 times. He wasn't comfortable in professional settings where I was clearly in charge, where people deferred to my expertise instead of his opinions. He stood in my lobby looking uncomfortable and smaller than I remembered. His construction company uniform was clean but worn, and there were new lines around his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Can we talk privately? He asked. I led him into my conference room and closed the door. He sat heavily in one of the leather chairs, looking around at the wall displays of my certifications and awards with an expression I couldn't quite read. Your mother told me about the conversation you two had, he began. Which conversation would that be, Dad? He shifted uncomfortably. About the house situation. The $15,000. Eliza, I need you to understand how serious this is. We could lose everything. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. This was a man who'd spent my entire childhood telling me that money didn't grow on trees, that I needed to learn the value of hard work, that handouts created weakness of character. Tell me about the mortgage, Dad. When did you refinance last? His face flushed slightly. That's not really your business. It is if you want it to become my financial responsibility. The silence stretched between us. Finally, he sighed. We refinanced 4 years ago, pulled out equity to pay for Jake's medical bills when he was in the hospital, and to help David with his down payment. There it was. They'd borrowed against their house to help my brother buy his first home, but now they expected me to bail them out of the consequences. How much did David borrow for his down payment? $25,000. I nodded slowly. And when is he planning to pay that back? Dad's expression hardened. That was a gift, Eliza. Family helps family. Right. Family helps family. I stood up. Dad, what did Mom say to Emma at Jake's birthday party? What does that have to do with anything? Answer the question. Have you ever felt like you could see the exact moment someone realized they'd been caught in their own hypocrisy? Dad squirmed in his chair like a teenager caught cheating on a test. Your mother was just concerned about Emma's health. She called my daughter pudgy and refused to give her cake, in front of the entire family. How is that concern for health? Look, Eliza, your mother has strong opinions about childhood obesity. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. Emma is a perfectly healthy 8-year-old who plays soccer, takes dance lessons, and eats balanced meals. She's not obese. She's not even overweight. She's a normal child who got publicly humiliated by her grandmother. Dad looked everywhere except at me. Maybe your mother could have been more tactful. More tactful? I almost laughed. Dad, she emotionally abused my daughter in front of 23 people. Tactful doesn't enter into it. You're being dramatic. There it was again. The family responds to accountability. Everyone else is being dramatic, oversensitive, making mountains out of molehills. Never mind the actual harm caused. I walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Dad's old pickup truck sat next to my Lexus, and the contrast pretty much summed up our entire relationship dynamic. Let me ask you something, I said without turning around. In all the years I've been coming to Sunday dinners, how many times has Mom criticized something about me? My weight, my clothes, my parenting, my career choices? She's just trying to help. How many times, Dad? Silence. Because I can think of dozens. Emma's too thin, then she's too heavy. I work too much, then I don't make enough money. I'm too strict with Emma, then I'm too lenient. My hair's too long, then it's too short. I turned back to face him. When exactly has she offered support instead of criticism? Dad's face was getting redder. Your mother loves you. She loves Emma. Just because she expresses it differently? Love doesn't look like public humiliation, Dad. Love doesn't look like making a child question her worth because of her appearance. So what? You're never going to speak to us again? You're going to destroy this family over one comment? I sat back down across from him. One comment? Dad, this is about 32 years of comments. This is about a pattern of behavior that I've tolerated because I thought it was normal. Because I thought this was just how families worked. This is how families work. People aren't perfect. You learn to accept. No. My voice was firmer than I'd ever used with him. This is how dysfunctional families work. Healthy families don't require children to accept emotional abuse in the name of love. Dad stood up abruptly. Fine. Be stubborn. But when we lose our house, when your mother and I are homeless, you'll have to live with that choice. I watched him walk toward the door, then called after him. Dad, wait. He turned, hope flickering in his eyes. I have a question about the $15,000. What about it? Is it a loan or a gift? His forehead wrinkled. What do you mean? I mean, would you expect me to pay you back? Or would this be like the $25,000 you gave David? Another pause. We'd figure something out. That's not an answer. Eliza, we're family. We don't keep score. I smiled then, because suddenly everything was crystal clear. Actually, Dad, you do keep score. You just don't keep it consistently. He left without another word, and I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about scorekeeping in families. About who gets held accountable and who gets protected. About who's expected to sacrifice and who's allowed to receive. That evening, I sat down with Emma while she did her homework. Baby, how are you feeling about what happened at Uncle Jake's party? She looked up from her math worksheet. I don't want to go to Grandma's house anymore. Why not? Because she made me feel bad about myself. And nobody told her that was wrong. Out of the mouths of babes. My 8-year-old daughter had summarized the entire family dynamic in 2 sentences. What if I told you that we don't have to go anywhere that makes us feel bad about ourselves? Her eyes got wide. Really? Really? We get to choose who we spend time with based on how they treat us. Even if they're family? Especially if they're family. Family should treat us better than anyone else, not worse. Friday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. Eliza Marie. Mom's voice was ice cold, using my full name like I was 12 years old again. Your father told me about your conversation yesterday. I figured he would. I cannot believe you would hold your own family's housing situation hostage over a simple misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Not mistake, not poor judgment, not inappropriate behavior. Misunderstanding. As if the problem was my comprehension rather than her actions. Mom, there's no misunderstanding. You humiliated Emma, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. I was looking out for her health. In my day, we didn't coddle children about their weight problems. Emma doesn't have weight problems. She has a grandmother problem. The sharp intake of breath on the other end told me I'd hit home. Well, Mom said finally, I see where your priorities lie. Your stubborn pride is more important than family loyalty. My daughter's emotional safety is more important than family dysfunction. Don't call us again until you've come to your senses. She hung up, and I realized I was smiling. You know what's funny about ultimatums? They only work if the other person values what you're threatening to take away. The silent treatment from my parents lasted exactly 11 days. I know because Emma marked each day on her calendar with a happy face sticker, her own way of tracking what she called the days we didn't feel bad about ourselves. During those 11 days, something interesting happened. The constant background anxiety I'd carried for years started to fade. I didn't realize how much emotional energy I'd been spending on managing my mother's moods, anticipating her criticisms, or recovering from her casual cruelties until that energy was freed up for other things. Emma and I established new weekend routines. Saturday morning farmers market visits where we picked out ingredients for elaborate pancake experiments. Sunday afternoon hikes with my neighbor Lisa and her daughter Sophie, who was Emma's age. We discovered that Emma was actually a natural comedian when she wasn't worried about being judged for everything she said. Mom, she said one Sunday while we were hiking, I think I'm funnier when Grandma's not around. Why do you think that is? Because Grandma doesn't think kids are supposed to be funny. She thinks we're supposed to be quiet and polite and small. My 8-year-old had perfectly identified the family dynamic that had taken me 3 decades to recognize. But the peace couldn't last forever. On day 12, David called. Liz, we need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? What about? Just meet me at Starbucks on 5th Street, 11 o'clock. I almost said no because I could hear in his voice that this wasn't going to be a social call. This was going to be an intervention. But curiosity won, and the next morning I found myself sitting across from my brother in a crowded coffee shop, watching him struggle to find the right words. Mom and Dad are really struggling, he finally said. I'm aware. Liz, they could actually lose the house. David, they borrowed against the house to give you $25,000 for your down payment. If they're going to lose it, maybe you should consider paying that money back. His face went pale. I can't just come up with $25,000. I've got a mortgage now and 2 kids. Right. You've got financial responsibilities, so do I. But you're single. You don't have a family depending on you. I stared at him. I don't have a family? David, what exactly is Emma? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. In your mind, my family doesn't count because it's just me and Emma. Your financial obligations are real and important. Mine are optional. You make more money than I do. Because I worked harder for longer and made different choices, that doesn't make me the family ATM. David shifted uncomfortably. Look, I get that you're upset about the thing with Mom and Emma. The thing? I leaned forward. Is that what we're calling it now? The thing? You know what I mean. I really don't. Say what you mean, David. Say what Mom did to Emma. He sighed. Mom said Emma was getting pudgy and didn't need cake. In front of 23 people. At a 5-year-old's birthday party. To an 8-year-old child. Okay, yes, it was inappropriate. But Mom's from a different generation. Stop. I held up my hand. Stop with the different generation excuse. Grandma Margaret was from an earlier generation than Mom, and she never once said anything cruel to us about our bodies or our food. This isn't generational. This is Mom. David looked miserable. What do you want me to say, Liz? That Mom was wrong? Fine, she was wrong. But she's still our mother, and she and Dad could end up homeless. They could also end up in a smaller house that they can actually afford. Is that really what you want? For our parents to lose everything? I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to think. Because here's the thing. I didn't want my parents to be homeless. I just wanted them to face the consequences of their choices instead of automatically expecting me to shield them from those consequences. David, can I ask you something? When was the last time Mom complimented me, said something genuinely nice about my life, my achievements, my parenting? He was quiet for a long moment. She brags about your business to her friends. To her friends, but not to me. When has she ever told me directly that she was proud of me? She loves you. That's not what I asked. I asked when she's expressed pride in me, approval, support. When has she celebrated my successes instead of finding ways to criticize them? David's silence was answer enough. Now let me ask you the same question about yourself. When has Mom criticized your parenting, your career choices, your life decisions? That's different. How is it different? I don't know, it just is. It's different because you're the golden child, David. You get encouragement and financial support and protection from consequences. I get criticism and expectations and bills to pay. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. It's never been fair. But it's been the dynamic for so long that you think it's normal. I stood up and grabbed my purse. I'm not saying I'll never help Mom and Dad, but I'm saying that help comes with conditions now. What kind of conditions? The kind where Emma gets treated with basic human decency. David called after me as I headed for the door. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them what I told Dad. When Mom's ready to apologize to Emma, we can discuss their financial situation. She's never going to apologize. Then I guess we're at an impasse. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I called a therapist. Dr. Sarah Chen had excellent online reviews and specialized in family dynamics and boundaries. Her first available appointment was 3 days away. What brings you to therapy? She asked when I finally sat in her office. I think I might be a terrible daughter, I said. Either that or my mother is a terrible mother. I'm not sure which. Dr. Chen smiled. Why don't we start with telling me about your family? And so I did. I told her about growing up as the family helper, the one who managed everyone else's emotions and needs, about Sunday dinners that felt like performance reviews, about birthday cake, humiliation, and mortgage bailout requests, and brothers who got gifts while daughters got bills. What would happen, Dr. Chen asked, if you just stopped? Stopped what? Stopped managing everyone else's problems, stopped absorbing their guilt, stopped sacrificing your own well-being for their comfort. My family would probably implode. And would that be your fault? The question hung in the air like a challenge. What do you think happens when someone who spent their whole life holding a family together decides to let go? Dr. Chen's question haunted me for the next week. Would it be my fault if my family imploded? I'd always assumed the answer was yes, that my role was to be the emotional glue holding everyone together, smoothing over conflicts, managing crises, keeping the peace at any cost. But what if it wasn't my job to hold them together? What if letting them implode was exactly what they needed? The test of that theory came sooner than expected. Saturday morning, I was at Emma's soccer game, cheering from the sidelines with the other parents, when I spotted my mother's car in the parking lot. She never came to Emma's games. In 2 years of soccer, she'd attended exactly 0 matches, claiming she didn't understand the sport and found it too loud. She walked across the field during halftime, wearing her church clothes and a determined expression. Other parents moved aside as she approached, sensing drama in the making. Eliza, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. We need to talk. I'm watching Emma play soccer. This is important. I looked at my daughter, who was laughing with her teammates while they shared orange slices and water bottles. Then I looked at my mother, who had driven 30 minutes to a place she'd never been before to ambush me at a children's sporting event. Mom, this is neither the time nor the place for this conversation. When is the right time? You won't answer my calls. You won't come to Sunday dinner. You've cut us off completely. Several parents were openly staring now. Susan Martinez, whose daughter played midfielder, looked like she was watching a particularly dramatic soap opera episode. I haven't cut you off. I've established boundaries. Mom's voice rose. Boundaries? Is that what you call abandoning your family when they need you most? Emma looked over from the team huddle, her face clouding with concern. The last thing I wanted was for her to witness another public confrontation involving her grandmother. We can talk about this later. At home, like adults. We'll talk about it now, Mom said, crossing her arms. I want to know what it's going to take for you to stop this ridiculous tantrum and help us save our house. Tantrum? Because protecting my daughter from emotional abuse was equivalent to a toddler having a meltdown. The referee blew the whistle for the second half. Emma's team took the field, but my daughter kept glancing over at us instead of focusing on the game. Mom, you're disrupting Emma's soccer game. Please leave. I'm not leaving until we resolve this. That's when I realized something important. My mother had no boundaries. She would create scenes at children's soccer games. She would ambush me at my office. She would use any tactic necessary to get what she wanted. The only way to deal with someone who respects no boundaries is to enforce consequences. I pulled out my phone and walked a few steps away. Lisa? I said when my neighbor answered. I need a huge favor. Can you take Emma home after the game and watch her for a couple hours? I'll explain later. Then I walked back to where my mother stood with her arms crossed and her jaw set. Okay, Mom, you want to talk? Let's talk, but not here. I led her to the parking lot, away from the other parents and children. The soccer field noise faded to background as we faced each other between two minivans. I'm listening, I said. We got a foreclosure notice yesterday. We have 30 days to bring the mortgage current or we lose the house. How much do you need? $18,000 now. The penalties and fees added up. $3,000 more than the original $15,000. Because financial problems don't improve when you ignore them. And what happens after I give you $18,000? Mom looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, what's your plan for staying current going forward? Dad's business is still slow, right? Your expenses haven't decreased. So what stops this from happening again in 6 months? We'll figure something out. The family motto strikes again. We'll figure something out. Which really meant we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, or hopefully something will change, or maybe we can get Eliza to pay for that too. Mom, before we discuss money, I need you to acknowledge what happened at Jake's party. Her expression hardened. I already told you. I was concerned about Emma's health. Stop. Just stop with that lie. My voice was sharper than I'd intended. You weren't concerned about her health. You were being cruel. And you did it publicly to maximize the humiliation. I would never deliberately hurt my granddaughter, but you did hurt her. Whether you meant to or not, you hurt her. And instead of apologizing when you realized what you'd done, you've spent 2 weeks justifying it. Mom's face flushed. I don't owe anyone an apology for caring about a child's well-being. There it was. The hill she was going to die on. She would rather lose her house than admit she'd been wrong to humiliate an 8-year-old. Okay, I said calmly. Then we don't have anything else to discuss. I started walking toward my car. Eliza, you can't just walk away from this. I turned back. Watch me. What am I supposed to tell your father? Tell him what you told me, that you don't owe anyone an apology for your behavior. I'm sure he'll find that very comforting when you're packing up the house. The drive home was strangely peaceful. I'd expected to feel guilty, anxious, torn apart by the confrontation. Instead, I felt clear, like I'd finally stopped pretending that black was white, that cruelty was love, that my family's dysfunction was somehow my responsibility to fix. Dr. Chen would be proud. Emma was waiting when I got home, her soccer uniform grass-stained and her cheeks still flushed from running. Mom, why was Grandma at my game? She's never come before. She wanted to talk to me about some grown-up stuff. She looked mad. She was upset about some choices I've made. Emma considered this seriously. Are they good choices? I think so, but she disagrees. Well, Emma said, grabbing her water bottle from her soccer bag, I think your choices have been really good lately. We've been a lot happier. Out of the mouths of babes, again. That evening, David called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message while making dinner. Liz, what the hell happened at the soccer game? Mom came home crying, saying you humiliated her in front of strangers. Dad's talking about taking a second mortgage on his truck. This is getting out of hand. Call me back. I didn't call him back. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch while Emma played in the yard. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Linda, David's wife. I know this isn't my place, but I think you should know that your mom has been telling people you're trying to destroy the family because you're jealous of David. I thought you should hear it from someone who doesn't believe it. Interesting. So the narrative was being rewritten. I wasn't protecting my daughter from emotional abuse. I was jealous of my brother and using the mortgage situation to hurt my parents. I texted back, thanks for the heads up. How are the kids? Confused. Jake keeps asking why Emma doesn't come to Sunday dinner anymore. I don't know what to tell him. Tell him the truth, that sometimes adults need space from each other when they can't agree on how to treat children. That's fair. For what it's worth, what your mom said to Emma was completely out of line. I would have walked out too. It was nice to know I wasn't completely crazy. Sunday came and went without the usual dinner invitation. Instead, Emma and I went to a matinee movie, then got ice cream and walked around the downtown farmers market. As we shared a funnel cake, something Mom would have definitely had opinions about, Emma looked up at me with chocolate smudged on her chin. Mom, are you sad that we don't see Grandma and Grandpa anymore? Sometimes, I admitted. I wish things could be different. Different how? I wish they could love us the way we need to be loved. Emma nodded solemnly. Maybe someday they'll learn how. Maybe. But I wasn't going to sacrifice my daughter's self-worth while waiting for that day to come. Monday morning brought a certified letter that would change everything. The certified letter was from Morrison, Klein & Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of. Inside was a formal notice that my parents were suing me for elder financial abuse and demanding the $18,000 as previously promised financial support. I read it 3 times before the words actually sank in. My parents were suing me for money I'd never promised them, for elder abuse that consisted of not giving them money. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The same woman who had publicly humiliated my daughter was now claiming victim status because I wouldn't pay her mortgage. I called Dr. Chen immediately. "This is escalation," she said when I explained the situation. When people lose control of a relationship dynamic they've maintained for years, they sometimes resort to more extreme measures to regain that control. Can they actually win this lawsuit? Based on what you've told me, extremely unlikely. But that might not be the point. Lawsuits are expensive and stressful and time-consuming. Sometimes the threat of legal action is meant to force compliance rather than actually win in court. I thought about that while Emma was at school. My parents knew I ran a business that depended on my professional reputation. They knew that being sued, even frivolously, would cause me stress and expense and potential embarrassment. They were gambling that I'd pay $18,000 to make the lawsuit go away. What they didn't know was that I'd already decided I was done enabling their dysfunction. And nothing makes you more committed to a decision than someone trying to legally force you to change your mind. I called my own lawyer, Rebecca Martinez, who specialized in family law and had handled my divorce 5 years earlier. "This is interesting," she said after reviewing the documents. "They're claiming you verbally agreed to provide financial support and that your failure to do so constitutes neglect of vulnerable adults." I never agreed to anything. And since when are they vulnerable adults? Dad's 62 and in perfect health. Mom's 59 and more functional than half the people I know. That's exactly what we'll argue. But Eliza, I have to ask, do you have the financial means to help them? Yes. And you're choosing not to? I'm choosing not to reward bad behavior. I'm choosing not to teach my daughter that family members get to treat her poorly as long as they need money. I'm choosing to enforce boundaries that should have been in place decades ago. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Okay. I've represented a lot of people in family financial disputes, and usually there are shades of gray. This one feels pretty black and white to me. We'll fight it. That afternoon, I picked Emma up from school and took her out for ice cream. Not because we had anything to celebrate, but because I wanted to see her smile while I processed the fact that my parents had declared legal war on me. "Mom, you look sad," she said while working on a triple chocolate scoop that was definitely too big for her. "I'm dealing with some grown-up problems with Grandma and Grandpa. Are they still mad that you won't give them money?" Sometimes Emma's perceptiveness startled me. "How did you know about that?" "I heard you talking to Uncle David on the phone, and Linda told me that Grandma and Grandpa might lose their house." I sighed. So much for protecting her from adult drama. "What do you think about that?" I asked. Emma considered carefully while licking chocolate off her spoon. "I think maybe they should get a smaller house that they can afford. Like when we moved out of the big house after you and Daddy got divorced. Our divorce had required downsizing from the 4-bedroom house we'd shared to our current 3-bedroom condo. Emma had been 3 at the time, and I'd worried constantly about how the change would affect her. "Were you sad when we had to move?" "A little bit at first. But then I liked our new house better because it felt cozier. And you were happier there." Kids notice everything. Emma had picked up on the fact that I was happier in a smaller space I could actually afford than I'd been in a larger space that stretched our budget. "Do you think I should give Grandma and Grandpa money to keep their big house? Do you want to?" "That's a complicated question." Emma finished her ice cream and wiped her hands carefully on her napkin. "Mom, when kids are mean to other kids at school, do the teachers give them presents?" "No, baby. Usually they get consequences. So why would grown-ups get money for being mean?" I stared at my 8-year-old daughter, who had just summarized complex family dynamics with the clarity of someone who hadn't yet learned to make excuses for bad behavior. "That's a very good point. I think you should keep your money," Emma said matter-of-factly. "And maybe someday Grandma will learn how to be nice, and then you can decide if you want to help her." That evening, David called again. This time I answered. "Liz, what is this lawsuit thing? Mom says you forced her to take legal action." "I forced her?" I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "David, I haven't spoken to Mom in 2 weeks except when she ambushed me at Emma's soccer game. How exactly did I force her to sue me?" "By refusing to help when they're desperate. I offered to discuss helping them if Mom apologized to Emma. She refused." "How is that my fault?" "Because you're holding their financial crisis hostage to your hurt feelings." "My hurt feelings?" I could feel my voice rising. "David, Mom emotionally abused my daughter. This isn't about hurt feelings. This is about protecting Emma from someone who thinks it's acceptable to humiliate children." "You're being overdramatic." Am I? Tell me something, David. How do you think Mia or Jake would have felt if someone had called them fat at a birthday party in front of 20 people? Silence. How do you think Linda would react if someone did that to your children? That's different. How? How is it different when it happens to Emma? Because, he struggled for an answer. Because you're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Or maybe you've spent so many years minimizing mom's behavior that you've forgotten what normal looks like. Don't psychoanalyze me, Liz. Then don't enable mom's emotional abuse and then blame me for refusing to pay for the privilege. I hung up and immediately felt the familiar pang of guilt. David wasn't the enemy here. He was just as much a victim of our family dynamics as I was. The difference was that he'd found his survival strategy in being the golden child, the one who never challenged mom's narrative, who kept his head down and received approval in return. My strategy had been different. I'd tried to earn love through usefulness, through solving problems, through being indispensable. Both strategies were forms of survival in a family system that didn't offer unconditional love, but Emma didn't have to inherit those survival strategies. She could grow up in a family where love didn't come with conditions, where her worth wasn't tied to her usefulness or her compliance. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. David's upset. But for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Someone needs to protect Emma, and if it has to be just you, then so be it. That text meant more to me than she probably realized. Wednesday morning brought another surprise. An unexpected call from my Aunt Carol, Mom's younger sister. Honey, she said without preamble, I need to talk to you about this situation with your parents. What about it? Well, I think you should know that your mother has been calling everyone in the family, trying to get them to pressure you to change your mind. And most of us are wondering what took you so long to stand up to her. I nearly dropped the phone. Excuse me? Eliza, your mother has been criticizing you your entire life. We've all watched it happen. We've all been uncomfortable with it. But nobody wanted to get in the middle of family business. You never said anything. I know, and I'm sorry about that. But sweetheart, what she said to Emma at that party? That was the last straw for a lot of us. You don't humiliate a child like that. I don't care what your reasons are. I sat down heavily in my desk chair. Mom told everyone that I'm being vindictive and jealous. And none of us believed it. Honey, you've been the family problem solver for decades. You've never been jealous or vindictive. You've been generous to a fault. Then why is everyone staying quiet? Because we're hoping you'll stick to your guns for once. Someone needs to set boundaries with your mother, and apparently you're the only one brave enough to do it. After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about the family members who had watched my mother criticize and diminish me for years, but had stayed silent. They'd seen the pattern, recognized it as unhealthy, but hadn't intervened because it was easier to let me absorb the dysfunction than to confront it. Now they were hoping I'd continue to absorb it in a different way, by standing my ground instead of giving in. But what if this wasn't about me being brave enough to set boundaries? What if this was about being tired enough to stop accepting cruelty as love? What do you think will happen next when someone who's spent their whole life keeping the peace decides that some things are worth fighting for? The next development came from an unexpected source. Thursday afternoon, I was reviewing quarterly tax returns when my assistant Karen buzzed my office. There's a Mrs. Henderson here to see you. She says it's about your parents' mortgage situation. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 70s wearing a navy blue suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. I'm Dorothy Henderson, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I'm a retired social worker, and I've been keeping an eye on this lawsuit situation involving your parents. I'm sorry, how exactly are you involved in this? Your mother and I volunteer together at the community center. She's been vocal about her legal troubles with her ungrateful daughter. Mrs. Henderson's tone suggested she'd heard quite an earful. I thought you might like to know what she's been saying. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a small notebook. According to Patricia, you make over $200,000 a year, you live in a mansion, you drive a Bentley, and you're letting your poor elderly parents become homeless out of spite because she gave your daughter some harmless health advice. I blinked. I drive a Lexus. I live in a condo. I make a decent living, but nowhere near $200,000. And what she said to Emma was neither harmless nor health advice. Mrs. Henderson smiled grimly. I figured as much. Your mother has a tendency toward creative storytelling when she wants sympathy. Why are you telling me this? Because I've worked with abused children for 40 years, and what your mother described doing to your daughter at that birthday party made my blood boil. Then when she started bragging about suing you to force you to pay her bills, I realized she was still abusing people, just targeting adults now. She pulled out another paper from her briefcase. This is a letter I've written to the judge handling your case. It details my professional observations about your mother's behavior patterns and my concerns about the authenticity of her claims. I read through the letter, which was written in professional legal language but essentially said that Patricia showed classic signs of narcissistic manipulation and that her lawsuit appeared to be retaliatory rather than legitimate. Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate this, but why would a judge care about a volunteer colleague's opinion? Because I'm not just a volunteer colleague. I'm the court-appointed advocate who evaluated your parents for the elder abuse investigation. My head started spinning. What elder abuse investigation? The one triggered when your parents filed their lawsuit. When someone claims elder financial abuse, the court automatically orders a social services investigation to determine if the elderly parties are actually being abused or neglected. And your parents are about as far from vulnerable elders as it gets. Your father drives himself to work every day in construction. Your mother volunteers 20 hours a week and runs the community center's fundraising committee. They're both physically and mentally capable of managing their own affairs. She closed her briefcase with a snap. What they are is financially irresponsible and emotionally manipulative. The investigation also revealed that they've borrowed money from several other family members over the years and never paid any of it back. Other family members? Your Uncle Jim co-signed a car loan for them 3 years ago and ended up paying it off himself when they defaulted. Your Aunt Carol loaned them $5,000 for home repairs that were never done. They owe your cousin Mike $8,000 from some emergency that apparently wasn't actually an emergency. I felt like I was learning about strangers, not my parents. I had no idea. They're very good at compartmentalizing their financial requests. Everyone thought they were the only ones being asked to help. But when the court investigator started digging, the pattern became clear. Mrs. Henderson stood to leave, then paused at my door. For what it's worth, dear, you're doing the right thing. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their bad choices. Your parents need to face the consequences of their financial decisions, and your daughter needs to see that her mother will protect her from emotional harm. After she left, I called Rebecca Martinez immediately. This changes everything, she said when I explained about the investigation. If there's documented evidence that your parents have a pattern of borrowing money and not repaying it, and if the court investigator has determined they're not actually vulnerable elders, their lawsuit basically falls apart. What happens next? We wait for the investigation report to be filed with the court, then we petition to have the case dismissed. Given what you've told me, I'd say there's a very good chance this will be thrown out within the next few weeks. That evening, Emma and I were making homemade pizza when my phone rang. David again. Liz, did you know there was an investigation? I just found out today. Did you? Mom called me in a panic. Apparently, some social worker has been asking questions about their finances and talking to family members. And Uncle Jim told the investigator about the car loan situation. Aunt Carol talked about the home repair money. Cousin Mike mentioned the $8,000 they borrowed for Dad's emergency surgery that turned out to be elective dental work. I heard the shift in David's voice. The dawning realization that maybe our parents' financial problems weren't as simple as bad luck and temporary hardship. David, did you know about any of those other loans? No. Did you? No. Apparently, they've been keeping their financial requests compartmentalized so none of us would see the full pattern. Long silence on his end. Jesus, Liz, if all that's true, then they've borrowed probably $50,000 from family members over the past few years. And paid back exactly none of it. But they gave me $25,000 for my house. They borrowed against their house to give you $25,000 for your house. They used equity as cash, and now they're surprised that their mortgage payments are higher. Another long pause. I feel sick, David said finally. Welcome to how I've felt for the past month. What am I supposed to do? I can't pay back $25,000. You're not supposed to do anything, David. You didn't know the money was borrowed. You thought it was a gift. The problem isn't that you took money that was offered. The problem is that they offered money they didn't have, and then expected other people to cover the consequences. So what happens now? Now they face the reality of their choices. Maybe they'll have to downsize. Maybe they'll have to change their lifestyle. Maybe they'll have to ask you to start paying back that $25,000, even if it takes years. And if they lose the house? Then they lose the house. People survive losing houses, David. They find apartments. They move in with family temporarily. They figure it out. What people don't survive is thinking that love means accepting abuse. After we hung up, Emma looked up from where she was spreading sauce on her pizza dough. Was that Uncle David? Yes. Is he sad? He's learning some things about Grandma and Grandpa that are hard to understand. Like how they ask everyone for money but don't pay it back? I stared at her. How do you know about that? I heard you talking to Aunt Carol last week, and I heard Linda tell Uncle David that her mom loaned Grandma money for Christmas presents but never got paid back. Emma continued spreading sauce with careful concentration. Mom, is it wrong to ask for help when you need it? No, baby. It's not wrong to ask for help. But it's wrong to lie about why you need help? Yes. And it's wrong to take money from everyone and never pay it back? Yes. And it's wrong to be mean to kids and then expect their mommies to give you money? I smiled despite everything. Very wrong. Then I think you're making the right choices. Me too, baby. Me too. Friday morning brought a call from Rebecca with news that would change everything. The court investigator filed her report, she said. I'm faxing you a copy now, but the short version is that she recommends the case be dismissed immediately and suggests that your parents might want to consider family counseling to address their financial and relationship issues. What does that mean for the lawsuit? It means it's over. No judge is going to rule in favor of people who have been systematically borrowing money from family members under false pretenses. Your parents' attorney will probably advise them to drop the case rather than risk having to pay your legal fees. I hung up and realized I felt empty. Not relieved, not triumphant, just empty. I had won, but what exactly had I won? The right to keep my money? The confirmation that my parents were financially irresponsible? The validation that protecting my daughter was the right choice? All of those things were true, but they didn't feel like victory. They felt like the end of something, and I wasn't sure yet what would replace it. Emma found me sitting at the kitchen table staring at my coffee. Mom, are you okay? I think so. The lawsuit is going away. Is that good? Yes, that's good. Then why do you look sad? Because sometimes being right doesn't feel the way you think it will. Because sometimes protecting yourself and your child means accepting that some relationships can't be saved. But I didn't say that to my 8-year-old. Instead, I said, sometimes grown-up feelings are complicated, but I'm going to be okay. Are we going to be okay? I looked at my daughter, this wise, funny, resilient little person who had watched her mother stand up to bullies and choose love over dysfunction, and I realized that we were more than okay. We're going to be perfect. The lawsuit was officially dropped on a Wednesday. Rebecca called to confirm that my parents' attorney had filed a motion to dismiss with prejudice, which meant they could never sue me again on the same grounds. I felt like I should celebrate somehow, but instead, I found myself thinking about the cost of winning. Not the financial cost. Rebecca's fees were reasonable, and I could afford them easily. The emotional cost. I had protected Emma and established boundaries with my parents, but those boundaries had effectively ended our relationship. Sunday dinners were a thing of the past. Holiday gatherings would be awkward at best. Impossible at worst. Emma might never have a relationship with her grandparents. Was protecting her from emotional abuse worth cutting her off from half her family? The answer came unexpectedly that Friday afternoon. Emma had a friend over for a sleepover, and I was making popcorn while the girls watched a movie when I overheard their conversation. My grandma always brings me presents when she visits, Emma's friend Sophia was saying. What do your grandparents give you? I paused in the kitchen, waiting to hear how Emma would answer. My grandma used to give me worried feelings, Emma said matter-of-factly, like I had to be perfect all the time or she would be disappointed. But now she doesn't come over anymore, so I don't get worried feelings as much. That's weird. Grandmas are supposed to make you feel happy. I know. My mom explained that some grown-ups don't know how to love kids the right way, so sometimes kids have to stay away from them, even if they're family. That's sad. Yeah, but it's better to feel sad sometimes than to feel bad about yourself all the time. I stood in the kitchen holding a bowl of popcorn, listening to my 8-year-old daughter explain healthy boundaries with more clarity than most adults could manage. She was right. It was better to feel sad sometimes than to feel bad about yourself all the time. Monday brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Dad's truck was in the parking lot when I arrived, and he was sitting in the lobby waiting for me. We need to talk, he said without preamble. I led him to my office and closed the door. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, but also somehow deflated. The angry determination from his previous visit had been replaced by something that looked almost like defeat. The lawsuit's done, he said. I know. The investigator's report? It made us look pretty bad. Dad, I'm not going to gloat about this. I never wanted it to go this far. I know. He rubbed his face with both hands. Eliza, I need you to understand something. When your mother decided to sue you, I thought she'd lost her mind. But she was so convinced you were being vindictive, so sure that you would cave if we just applied enough pressure. I wasn't being vindictive. I was protecting my daughter. I know that now. The investigator asked me a lot of questions about Emma, about what happened at the party. When I had to describe it out loud to a stranger, I realized how it sounded. How did it sound? Like child abuse. The words hung in the air between us. Dad had finally said what everyone else had been thinking. Your mother has always been critical, he continued. I told myself it was just her personality, that she meant well. But watching Emma's face when Patricia said those things about the cake, Jesus, Eliza. I should have stopped it right then. Why didn't you? Because I've spent 35 years of marriage not stopping it. Because somewhere along the way, I decided it was easier to let your mother say whatever she wanted than to deal with the argument that would follow if I contradicted her. Dad looked out my office window at the parking lot, where his old pickup sat next to newer, shinier cars. "We're going to lose the house," he said quietly. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" I considered the question seriously. "I'm sorry that you're facing consequences that are painful and scary. I'm not sorry that you're facing consequences." He nodded. "Fair enough. What will you do?" "There's a double-wide trailer for rent on the other side of town. It's in a nice park, clean, well-maintained. We can afford the rent on Dad's income alone." "That sounds manageable." "Your mother is not happy about it." I could imagine. Mom's entire identity was tied up in appearances, in having the right address and the right car and the right image. Living in a trailer park, even a nice one, would feel like public acknowledgement of failure. How is she handling all of this? Dad's laugh was bitter. "She's convinced it's all your fault. That if you had just given us the money like family is supposed to, none of this would have happened. She's not speaking to most of the family because they didn't support the lawsuit." "What about David?" "David's been coming around more, actually. He's been helping us pack, trying to convince your mother to apologize to Emma. He feels terrible about the money situation." "He shouldn't. He didn't know." That's what I told him. "But he's talking about setting up a payment plan to pay back some of the money we borrowed for his down payment." "Over how many years?" "However long it takes." He says he can't live with the idea that we used other people's money to help him buy a house. I was proud of David for that. It would have been easy to assume that gifts had no strings attached, that he wasn't responsible for the source of the money. But he was choosing accountability over comfort, which couldn't be easy. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "The other money you borrowed from family members over the years, what was it really for?" His face flushed. "Most of it was for your mother's shopping. She'd get these ideas about redecorating the house, or she'd see something at the department store and convince herself we needed it. I kept thinking if I just worked harder, made more money, we could afford her expenses without borrowing. But her expenses kept growing faster than my income. So you borrowed money to fund Mom's shopping habits and told people it was for emergencies." "Yes." "For how long?" "About 10 years. I did quick math in my head. If they'd borrowed $50,000 from family members over 10 years, that was $5,000 a year in spending beyond their means. No wonder they couldn't keep up with their mortgage payments." "Dad, that's not financial hardship. That's financial mismanagement." "I know that now." "What changed?" The investigator showed me the numbers. She laid out everything we'd borrowed, everything we'd spent, everything we actually earned. She asked me to explain how we thought this was sustainable. He paused. I couldn't, because it wasn't. Dad stood up to leave, then turned back. "Eliza, I know you won't give us money for the house. And honestly, I understand why. But would you consider letting Emma visit us in the trailer? Your mother misses her granddaughter. Does Mom understand why Emma can't visit right now? She says she understands that you're being oversensitive about the cake incident. Then no. When Mom is ready to take responsibility for hurting Emma and commit to not doing it again, we can discuss visits." Dad nodded sadly. "I figured that would be your answer." "Dad, wait." He stopped. "I don't want to keep Emma away from you. If you wanted to take her out for ice cream or to a movie, just the two of you, I'd be okay with that." For the first time since he'd arrived, Dad smiled. "I'd like that very much." After he left, I sat in my office thinking about the difference between accountability and punishment. I wasn't trying to punish my parents for their financial mistakes. Those consequences were natural results of their choices. But I was absolutely going to protect Emma from emotional harm, even if that meant limiting her access to grandparents who couldn't treat her with basic kindness. That evening, Emma and I had a serious conversation about what was happening with her grandparents. "Grandpa wants to spend time with you," I told her. "Just him, not Grandma. How would you feel about that?" Emma thought for a long moment. "Will he be nice to me?" "I believe he will. But if he's not, you can tell me and we'll stop the visits immediately." "Okay. I miss him a little bit." "What about Grandma?" "I don't miss feeling worried all the time when she was around." Kids are remarkably good at identifying what's healthy and what's not, when adults stop confusing the issue with guilt and obligation. "Emma, Grandpa told me that Grandma misses you too. Does she miss being mean to me?" Such a simple question, but it cut straight to the heart of everything. "I don't think Grandma understands yet that she was being mean to you. Then maybe she needs to learn that first before I can miss her back." I hugged my wise little daughter and marveled at her emotional intelligence. She had figured out instinctively what it had taken me 3 decades to learn, that missing someone and trusting them are two completely different things. What do you think happens when a family's dynamics change this dramatically? When the person who always gave in finally draws a line in the sand? 6 weeks later, life had settled into a new normal. Emma had been on 3 outings with Grandpa. Ice cream, a movie, and a trip to the children's museum. Each time, she came home happy and relaxed, chattering about their adventures without any of the anxious energy that used to follow visits with both grandparents. "Grandpa told me they have a new house," she said after their museum trip. "It's smaller than the old one, but he says it has a better view of the sunset." How do you feel about that? I think people don't need big houses to be happy. Our condo is smaller than Daddy's house, but I like it better. She was right. Sometimes smaller is better when it fits your actual life instead of the life you think you're supposed to want. My business was thriving. Word had gotten around the professional community that I'd successfully defended myself against a frivolous lawsuit, and several new clients had specifically mentioned that they appreciated working with someone who stood up for their principles. Dr. Chen and I met every other week now instead of weekly. Our sessions focused less on processing family drama and more on maintaining healthy boundaries in other areas of my life. "You seem more confident," she observed during our latest appointment. "More centered. I feel like I finally know who I am when I'm not trying to manage everyone else's emotions." "What's that like?" "Quieter, but in a good way. Like I can actually hear my own thoughts." Dr. Chen smiled. "That's the sound of authentic living." The peace was interrupted on a Thursday morning when my assistant Karen buzzed my office with unusual urgency in her voice. "Your mother is here," she said. "She says it's important." I hadn't seen Mom since the soccer game confrontation 2 months earlier. Through Dad, I knew that she was struggling with the transition to trailer park living and had been essentially boycotting family gatherings because she was embarrassed about their housing situation. She walked into my office looking like she'd aged years in the past few months. Her usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled, and there was something different about her expression, less certainty, more vulnerability. "I need to talk to you about Emma," she said without sitting down. "What about Emma?" "I've been thinking about what happened at Jake's party, about what I said to her." I waited, not wanting to interrupt what might be the beginning of actual accountability. The investigator asked me a lot of questions about that day. She made me describe exactly what I said and why I said it. Mom's voice was quieter than usual. When I heard my own words repeated back to me, they sounded cruel. "They were cruel, Mom. I didn't mean them to be. I was genuinely concerned about Emma's eating habits." I felt the familiar frustration rising. Even now, she was qualifying her apology, making excuses. "Mom, stop. Just stop with the justifications. You called my 8-year-old daughter pudgy in front of 23 people and refused to give her birthday cake. There's no version of that story where you weren't being cruel." She sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. For the first time in my memory, Mom looked small and uncertain instead of commanding and critical. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Apologize without explaining myself. Take responsibility without defending my intentions. Admit I was wrong without making it about something else." The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the manipulative mother I'd grown up with. This was someone who seemed genuinely confused about how to navigate a conversation without controlling it. "Why don't you start with telling me what you think you did wrong?" "I humiliated Emma in public. I made her feel bad about herself. I prioritized my opinions about children's eating habits over her emotional well-being. It was a start." "How do you think that affected her?" "She probably felt embarrassed and ashamed. She probably wondered if something was wrong with her body. She probably felt like she couldn't trust me to be kind to her." All of that is accurate. Mom was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded in her lap. "Patricia Williamson called me last week," she said finally. "Her granddaughter is Emma's age, and she heard about what happened at the party through the Mom Network. She told me that if anyone had spoken to her granddaughter the way I spoke to Emma, she would have cut off all contact immediately. And she said she couldn't understand how you had been as patient as you were. She said most mothers would have banned me from seeing Emma permanently after what I did." I could see the wheels turning in Mom's head as she processed feedback from her peer group. Mom had always cared deeply about what other people thought, and apparently other grandmothers were not impressed with her parenting approach. Patricia said something else that I can't stop thinking about. "What?" She said that grandparents who lose access to their grandchildren usually have themselves to blame, but they spend so much energy being angry at their adult children that they never examine their own behavior. Mom looked up and met my eyes for the first time since she'd arrived. "I've been angry at you for 2 months. I convinced myself that you were being vindictive and unreasonable. But last week, I was at the grocery store and I saw a mother talking to her daughter the way I talked to Emma, and I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to intervene, to protect that little girl from that kind of criticism. And I realized that's exactly what you were doing, protecting Emma from me. There it was, the moment of clarity I'd been waiting for. Not an apology buried in justifications, but actual understanding of the impact of her actions. Mom, I never wanted to keep Emma away from you. I wanted to keep Emma away from someone who would hurt her feelings and then refuse to acknowledge that she'd done anything wrong. I know that now. The question is, what happens next? What do you want to happen next? I want to see my granddaughter again. I want to have a relationship with her that doesn't make her feel bad about herself. I want to stop being the kind of person that people need to protect their children from. Those are good goals. How do you plan to achieve them? Mom pulled a folded paper from her purse. I've been seeing someone, a counselor who specializes in family relationships. She's been helping me understand why I've always been so critical, why I seem to think that pointing out flaws is the same as being helpful. And what have you learned? That I was raised by people who believed love meant pushing children to be better, that criticism was a form of caring, that I've been parenting and grandparenting the way I was parented, without ever questioning whether it was actually effective or kind. How does that translate to changing your behavior with Emma? The counselor is helping me practice different ways of interacting, ways to show interest without giving advice, ways to be supportive without being controlling, ways to celebrate Emma exactly as she is instead of focusing on ways she could improve. I studied my mother's face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But what I saw was someone who seemed genuinely committed to change, not just to regain access to Emma, but because she'd realized that her approach to relationships wasn't working. If I were to consider letting you see Emma again, what would that look like? I'd like to start slowly. Maybe a supervised visit here at your office where you could see how I interact with her. If that goes well, maybe we could try a short outing with you present. I understand that I need to earn back your trust. And if you slip back into old patterns, if you start criticizing or giving unwanted advice, then you remove Emma from the situation and we start over. You're her mother, and your job is to protect her. I understand that now. I looked at this woman who had shaped so much of my self-doubt and anxiety, who had taught me that love came with conditions and criticism, who had spent my entire life pointing out my flaws and failures. But I also saw someone who was trying to change, who had done the work to understand her own behavior, who was willing to submit to boundaries and supervision, to rebuild a relationship with her granddaughter. Mom, before we discuss Emma, I need to know that you understand how your behavior affected me too. She nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that, about how many years I spent telling you that you weren't good enough, that you needed to change, that you were disappointing me somehow. I don't think I ever told you that I was proud of you, did I? No, you didn't. I'm proud of you now, not just for your business success, but for protecting Emma, for standing up to me when I was wrong, for refusing to enable bad behavior just because we're family. Tears started forming in her eyes. I'm proud of you for becoming a better parent than I was, for breaking the cycle instead of continuing it. I felt something shift inside my chest, like a knot I'd carried for decades was finally loosening. Thank you for saying that. I should have said it years ago. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments. So, Mom said finally, would you be willing to let me try again with Emma? Under supervised conditions to start, and Mom, if you revert to old patterns, if you make Emma feel bad about herself in any way, that's it. No more chances. I understand. And I want you to continue with the counselor. This isn't a quick fix situation. This is about fundamentally changing how you relate to people. Already scheduled for weekly sessions indefinitely. I smiled despite myself. Okay, let's try this again. But we're doing it my way, on my terms. I wouldn't expect anything else. For the first time in months, I felt something that might have been hope about my relationship with my mother. But the real test would come when she had to interact with Emma without falling back into decades of ingrained behavior patterns. The supervised visit was scheduled for the following Saturday afternoon in my office conference room. I'd brought coloring books, puzzles, and art supplies to keep Emma occupied while giving Mom opportunities to interact without the pressure of maintaining constant conversation. Emma was nervous that morning. What if she says something mean again? She asked while we were getting dressed. Then we leave immediately, and Grandma won't get another chance to see you until she proves she can be consistently kind. Will you stay with us the whole time? The entire time. I'll be right there. Okay. But Mom, if she makes me feel bad about my body again, I'm going to tell her that's not okay. I hugged my fierce little daughter. You absolutely should tell her that. You have every right to speak up for yourself. We arrived at my office at 2 o'clock to find Mom already waiting in the lobby. She'd brought a small wrapped present and looked more nervous than I'd ever seen her. Hello, Emma, she said carefully. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Hi, Grandma. Emma's voice was polite but guarded. We settled into the conference room, and I watched Mom like a hawk as she interacted with Emma. Her body language was different, less commanding, more tentative. When Emma showed her a drawing she was working on, Mom's first impulse seemed to be to suggest improvements. But she caught herself. That's beautiful, she said instead. I love how you use so many different colors. It's a rainbow, Emma explained. I wanted each stripe to be a different shade. You picked lovely shades. The way you blended the orange and red is really creative. Emma beamed at the genuine compliment, and I felt some of my tension ease. The visit continued for an hour with careful, deliberate interactions. Mom asked Emma about school, about soccer, about her friends. She listened to the answers without offering advice or corrections. When Emma mentioned liking art class, Mom shared a memory about loving to draw when she was Emma's age, without turning it into a teaching moment about practicing or improving. "Grandma," Emma said toward the end of the visit, "why are you talking to me differently than before?" Mom's face reddened slightly, but she answered honestly, "Because I realized that the way I talked to you before wasn't very kind. I was trying to be helpful, but I was actually being hurtful. I'm learning how to be a better grandmother." "Are you learning from a teacher?" "Sort of. I'm learning from a counselor, which is like a teacher for feelings and relationships." Emma considered this seriously. "That's good. Sometimes grown-ups need to learn new things too." "You're absolutely right. We're never too old to learn how to be better people." When the hour was up, Mom hugged Emma gently and thanked her for giving her another chance. "Can we see each other again soon?" Mom asked. Emma looked at me, then back at her grandmother. "If you keep being nice to me, I'm going to work very hard at that." After Mom left, Emma and I debriefed in the car. "How did that feel?" I asked. "Good, mostly. She seemed like she was trying really hard to be different." "Did anything worry you?" "Not really, but I could tell she wanted to say other things sometimes, but she stopped herself." My perceptive daughter had noticed Mom's internal struggle between old habits and new intentions. "How do you think she did overall?" "Better than before, but I want to see if she can keep being nice when we're not at your office." Smart kid. 2 weeks later, we attempted a public outing. Lunch at Emma's favorite restaurant, followed by a trip to the Children's Museum. This time, Mom would face the real test of managing her behavior in environments she couldn't control. The restaurant went surprisingly well. When Emma ordered chicken fingers and fries, Mom's face tightened slightly, but she said nothing about nutrition or healthier options. When Emma wanted dessert, Mom even suggested they share a piece of chocolate cake. "Grandma," Emma said while they were sharing cake, "this is much more fun than last time we had cake together." "I agree," Mom said. "I'm sorry about last time. That wasn't fun for anyone. It made me feel bad about myself." "I know, sweetheart. I never want to make you feel that way again." At the museum, Mom followed Emma's lead instead of trying to direct their activities. When Emma wanted to spend 20 minutes in the toddler area because she enjoyed the water play table, Mom sat nearby and watched instead of suggesting more age-appropriate exhibits. "This is boring for you," Emma said, noticing Mom's passive observation. "Actually, it's not boring at all. I like watching you enjoy yourself. You have such a creative way of playing." "Really? Really? You don't just play with things the way they're supposed to be played with. You make up your own games and stories. That's a special kind of imagination." Emma glowed under the praise. The afternoon was a success, but the real revelation came during our drive home. "Mom," Emma said from the back seat, "I think Grandma is learning how to love me better." "What do you mean?" "Before, it felt like she loved the idea of me being perfect more than she loved me. But today, it felt like she just loved me." I pulled over and turned around to look at my daughter. "Emma, that's one of the wisest things I've ever heard anyone say. Do you think she'll keep learning?" "I hope so. But even if she doesn't, you never have to accept being loved conditionally. You deserve to be loved exactly as you are." "I know. You taught me that." That evening, Mom called to thank me for allowing the extended visit. "It was wonderful," she said. "Emma is such a delightful child. I can't believe I spent so much time focusing on changing her instead of just enjoying her." "How did it feel to interact differently?" "Harder than I expected, but better. I caught myself wanting to give advice or make suggestions at least a dozen times. But when I stopped myself and just listened instead, Emma opened up in ways she never had before. That's the difference between controlling a relationship and participating in it. I'm beginning to understand that. Eliza, would it be possible to schedule regular visits? Nothing too frequent? Maybe every other week? Let me talk to Emma about what she's comfortable with." Emma's response was immediate and clear. "I want to see Grandma again, but I want you to come too until I'm sure she won't go back to being mean." So we established a new pattern. Every other Saturday, Emma and I would spend a few hours with Mom doing activities Emma chose. Mom continued her weekly counseling sessions and checked in with me regularly about how she was managing her old impulses. The change wasn't perfect or complete, but it was consistent. And for the first time in Emma's life, she had a grandmother who seemed genuinely interested in knowing her rather than changing her. 3 months later, Emma made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to invite Grandma to my school's Grandparents' Day," she said. "But just Grandma, not Grandpa yet." "Why just Grandma?" "Because I want to show my friends that she learned how to be nice to me, like proof that grown-ups can change if they try hard enough." And that's when I realized that this whole experience had taught Emma something invaluable, that she could maintain relationships with people who were willing to change while protecting herself from those who weren't. She was learning boundaries not through lectures about what she should accept, but through watching her mother model what self-respect looked like in action. But our family story wasn't quite finished. There was still one more chapter to write, and it would involve a revelation that would change how I understood my entire childhood. Grandparents' Day at Emma's school was a success. Mom spent 2 hours helping third graders with an art project, complimenting their creativity and encouraging their efforts without once suggesting improvements or corrections. Emma was proud to introduce her to friends and teachers, and several parents commented to me later about how lovely my mother was. "She's really good with kids," Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, told me afterward. Emma was so excited to have her here. It was surreal to hear my mother described as good with kids, when my entire childhood memory was of criticism and conditional love. But people can change, apparently, when they're motivated to do the work. That evening, Mom called to thank me again for allowing her to attend. "Emma was so proud to introduce me to her friends," she said. "I felt like I was seeing her through new eyes, confident, creative, joyful, the way she's supposed to feel about herself. She's always been those things, Mom. The difference is that now you're noticing them instead of focusing on what you think needs to be fixed. You're right. And Eliza, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago." "What's that?" "I've been talking to the counselor about my own childhood, about how I learned to parent the way I did. And I remembered something that I think explains a lot." I settled into my chair, sensing this was going to be a significant conversation. "When you were about Emma's age, your grandmother, my mother, pulled me aside at a family gathering and told me I was raising you to be spoiled and self-centered. She said that if I didn't start being stricter with you, pointing out your flaws, pushing you to be better, you would grow up entitled and unsuccessful." My blood ran cold. What exactly did she say? She said that children needed constant correction to develop character, that praising them too much would make them lazy, that pointing out their weaknesses was the only way to ensure they worked to improve themselves. And you believed her? I was 25 years old and desperately wanted her approval. She'd been critical of my parenting from the moment you were born, and suddenly she was offering me a roadmap to do it right. So yes, I believed her. I thought about my memories of my grandmother, who had always seemed stern and disapproving, but whom I'd assumed was just from a different generation. "Mom, how did Grandma treat you when you were growing up?" Long pause. "The same way I treated you. Constantly pointing out my flaws, telling me I wasn't good enough, that I needed to work harder to earn love and approval. And how did that make you feel? Terrible. Like I was never good enough no matter how hard I tried. Like love was something I had to earn through perfect behavior." The irony was staggering. My mother had spent my entire childhood treating me the way she'd been treated, believing it was effective parenting because she'd been told it would make me stronger and more successful. "Mom, did it ever occur to you that the way Grandma raised you might have been wrong?" Not until recently. I just assumed that parenting was supposed to be hard, that children were supposed to struggle to meet their parents' expectations. I thought unconditional love would make you weak. Do you think Emma is weak? God, no. Emma is confident, resilient, creative, kind. Everything I wanted you to be but thought I had to criticize you into becoming. And how do I parent Emma? With unconditional love, encouragement, support, boundaries that protect rather than restrict. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, the opposite of how I raised you. And which approach produced better results? Silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, I'm here. I'm just processing the fact that everything I thought I knew about effective parenting was not just wrong, but harmful. It wasn't entirely your fault. You were following the model you'd been given. But I was an adult, Eliza. I should have questioned whether making my child feel bad about herself was actually helping her. I should have noticed that criticism wasn't motivating you. It was diminishing you. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn love through achievement, through being useful, through managing everyone else's emotions and needs, all the ways I'd learned to apologize for taking up space, for having needs, for existing imperfectly. The good news is that we can break the cycle, I said. Emma is growing up knowing she's loved unconditionally. She's learning that her worth isn't tied to her performance or her usefulness. She's learning that healthy relationships don't require her to accept mistreatment. You broke the cycle, Mom said. You figured out how to love her better than I loved you, even though you didn't have a model for it. I had a model. I had the model of how not to do it. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Eliza, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for your business success, but for becoming the kind of mother I should have been, for protecting Emma from the same harm I caused you, for refusing to continue a pattern just because it was familiar. Thank you for saying that. And I need to apologize. Not just for what I said to Emma at the party, but for 32 years of making you feel like you weren't good enough, for teaching you that love had to be earned, for prioritizing your compliance over your well-being. I felt tears starting to form. I accept your apology. Do you think we might be able to have a different kind of relationship going forward? One where I support you instead of criticizing you? Where I celebrate your choices instead of questioning them? I'd like to try. But Mom, it has to be consistent. I can't go back to managing your emotions or accepting criticism disguised as concern. Emma is watching how we interact, and I won't model dysfunctional relationship patterns for her. Understood. And if I slip back into old habits? Then we take a break until you're ready to try again. Just like with Emma. Fair enough. After we hung up, I sat in my living room thinking about generational patterns and how they perpetuate themselves. My grandmother had likely been raised by someone who believed criticism was love, who thought children needed constant correction to develop character. She'd passed that belief to my mother, who'd passed it to me. But I'd broken the chain. Emma would grow up knowing that love was unconditional, that her worth was inherent, that relationships were supposed to add joy to life rather than anxiety. She would never have to choose between protecting herself and maintaining family relationships, because she would never be in a family that required that choice. 6 months later, our family dynamics had stabilized into something healthier than I'd ever imagined possible. Emma had regular visits with both grandparents, supervised initially, then gradually more independent as trust was rebuilt. Mom continued her weekly counseling and checked in with me regularly about her progress. David had established a payment plan to return the down payment money over 15 years, which helped his relationship with our parents tremendously. Linda often joined our family outings, and the kids were confused but happy that everyone was getting along better. Dr. Fee. Chen and I met monthly now, focusing on maintaining the boundaries I'd established and continuing to unlearn patterns of people-pleasing and emotional caretaking. You look different, she observed during one of our sessions. More settled, like you found your footing. I feel like I finally know who I am when I'm not trying to be who everyone else needs me to be. And what's that like? Quieter, but more authentic. I don't feel like I'm performing all the time. What would you tell someone who's struggling with similar family dynamics? I thought about that question seriously. I'd tell them that protecting yourself from emotional harm isn't selfish. It's necessary. That you can love people and refuse to accept poor treatment from them at the same time. That some relationships can be saved through boundaries, and others can't. But that's information, not a failure. Anything else? That children are always watching how we handle conflict, how we treat ourselves, how we allow others to treat us. We're teaching them what to accept in relationships by what we accept in relationships. And about breaking generational patterns? That it's possible, but it requires being willing to do the work even when the people around you aren't ready to change. Sometimes you have to be the cycle breaker, even if it means being the family black sheep for a while. As I drove home from that appointment, I thought about all the ways this experience had changed me. I'd learned that I could survive family disapproval, that my daughter's well-being was more important than family harmony, that some battles were worth fighting, even when the outcome was uncertain. Most importantly, I'd learned that love shouldn't require you to diminish yourself to receive it. That evening, Emma and I were making dinner together when she looked up from chopping vegetables and said, "Mom, I'm proud of you." "For what, baby?" "For teaching me that I don't have to let people be mean to me just because they're family. For showing me what it looks like to stick up for yourself and the people you love." I hugged my wise, resilient daughter and realized that this moment, this relationship, this life we'd built together was worth every difficult conversation, every boundary I'd had to enforce, every moment of uncertainty about whether I was doing the right thing. Emma would never have to choose between loving herself and being loved by others. She would never have to accept cruelty disguised as care. She would never have to sacrifice her self-worth for family approval. And that was the greatest gift I could give her, the knowledge that she was worthy of love exactly as she was, no conditions attached. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe. Remember that breaking generational cycles is never easy, but it's always worth it for the people we love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to continue patterns that cause harm, even when it's difficult and even when you're standing alone. Your worth isn't determined by your usefulness to others. You deserve relationships that celebrate you, not ones that require you to shrink yourself to fit. And sometimes protecting the people you love means protecting them from family members who haven't learned how to love without causing harm. Stay strong, keep your boundaries, and remember, you're never too old to learn how to love better.